to see. We all want to be real.
Hey, Christina and Stefan, how you doing?
Hello, Richard. How are you?
Hey,
Very
hey,
good. How's it
sweet.
going? Hey, Stefan, how's it going?
Good, good. Finally, one of the better days. Over here it got pretty cold again. We have freezing nights still, so looking forward to actually getting some spring.
Oh, I hear you. Where are you?
I'm like East Coast, south of Boston.
Okay, yeah. I lived there too for most of my life. I moved to Madrid, Spain last year in February, and yeah, right now it's just beautiful. These days are beautiful here. These past 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it's been almost like summer every day. So I can't complain about that, but I hear what you're saying. I speak with everybody back home, and everybody's telling me about the
Yep.
the new winter that's hitting everybody. So yeah, I hear you.
All right.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us tonight, Richard. It's a huge pleasure to talk to you and, be able to spread the wisdom with others. And, your work is really unbelievable. And we have no doubt that tonight we will have awesome discussion near a cup of tea about symbolism, ancient secrets, lost cultures, memory. And we will try to find the answer. What could we all do to be able to return again to the golden age together? And Richard Cassaro, for all of our listeners who may not be familiar with his work, is an author and he's a lecturer. And also, he is an explorer who probes the secrets of ancient cultures, comparative religion, sacred symbolism, esoteric and architecture, and secret societies. As a professional researcher into ancient cultural parallels, he has traveled to many countries in his quest to uncover a lost prehistoric golden age culture that was highly sophisticated and whose legacy is still visible in the ruins of the world first known civilizations. And also he wrote an amazing book which is called Written in Stone. And also he mentioned that he will have new book released in the June 2016, which will be called The Missing Link. So thank you once again for joining us tonight. And maybe you at the beginning could share some story how everything started for you. Also, you mentioned that you traveled a lot in your early ages and you reached everything through the experience and not only just reading books, but also studying and visiting places firsthand.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, thanks very much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's very nice to be invited. It's very nice of you, and thank you. Yeah, I've this is a lifelong calling for me. It's not something that I just got turned on to a few years ago, or even 10 years ago or 20 years ago. When I was very, very young, I knew about the mysteries of Atlantis and the mysteries of, the why are there similar why is there similar architecture, similar pyramids around the world, and a lot of these types of mysteries. I learned about Eric von Daniken at a young age. His whole idea that the ancient gods were astronauts. I was fascinated by that. That kind of turned me on to the whole world of there's something going on that people don't know about, and what is it? And I was always interested in mysteries and that type of thing. When I was very young, I kept a journal of the similarities shared by ancient cultures, and I mean very young. And newspaper clippings, photos. I made collages. It really, really interested me, and I wanted to write books about it, and I wanted to write fiction books, and I started to write fiction books about it, fictional books. And instead of publishing those books, I started to realize that the thing that made the book so interesting was that I was finding real stuff. I had fictional characters, but the fictional characters were finding real things. And I thought, wow, this is great. And little by little, I was like, you know what? It's more interesting for me to research the real stuff than to actually write the fictional stuff. So the fictional characters that I created kind of fell away. And I just concentrated on the real discoveries that I was making. And the traveling part, I traveled with my family when I was very young, and we went to different places. But excuse me, I really started to travel a lot when I was in my early 20s. And I really started to learn a lot there. I also went to college. I went to Pace University in New York City, and I studied philosophy. And I started to see that, the big stuff, like the ancient Greek philosophers, were saying the same exact thing as Hinduism, as the Vedas, as the Bhagavad Gita, and this type of stuff. So, I was putting big things together. And so that's really where I started to realize not only is the architecture similar, not only is there similar pyramids around the world, similar corbelled vault architecture around the world, similar mummies around the world, but the philosophies behind these cultures were parallel. Just as an example, Socrates talked about the doctrine of duality, just like the Hindus did. Socrates talked about the soul, the eternal soul, just like the Hindus did. Socrates talked about the transmigration of the soul, just like the Hindus, and on and on and on. And I know, Socrates, when you think of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, the Greek philosophers in general coincide with the wisdom that we find in India. And we could talk about China, we could talk about different places. It doesn't have to be just India and the Greek philosophers. We could talk about the similarities between the ancient Chinese and the ancient Maya in the New World. It
Hmm.
really doesn't matter, because it's all the same. I started to recognize what I call a universal religion, and that's where I started to recognize the Golden Age. Plato talked about Atlantis, and it wasn't just Plato, by the way. A lot of people don't realize that it was not just Plato. It's all through history. People were talking about this concept of Atlantis. I mean, the ancients, for example, Crantor, who was a student of Plato around 300 BC, he talked about Atlantis. Strabo, Posidonius, Zodicus, Proclus. I mean, you can keep going on, and that's just ancient times. So there is a tradition of this ancient civilization, a very sophisticated ancient civilization, and it's very interesting because if you look at the similarities for ancient cultures, it kind of ties into this concept of a golden age of Atlantis, or a golden age when some type of a higher civilization existed. And if you look at cultures like ancient China or India or Mayas in Mexico, or most of the ancient cultures all had the same type of architecture, symbolism, religion, etc. So it kind of very quickly I tied it all together,
Mm.
and from there on, I just started to, everything that I do from then on is just basically throwing up more evidence for this golden age civilization, and for the idea that civilization in general has declined. We're taught the other way. We're taught that, we came from cavemen, and
Hmm.
that we're space travelers, as if things have gotten better and better. But that's not what I see at all. I see a
Yeah.
complete decline, age by age, and now we're living in a very dark age. I
Yeah.
don't see technology as something of a high culture. I see our technology as something of a low culture. I think that the higher age cultures, the golden age cultures, all had what I call the third eye, and that's more of my research that I've found all over the world. It's not just in ancient India. The third eye is present across the world, and that's another piece of my research. So I was into it, most of my life, and everything that I do is somehow, it seems to be related to this concept and this work.
Yeah. And those kind of things is exactly what we're going to talk about today with you. But before we dive deeper here, please tell us where we can find you. Tell us your links and maybe some upcoming presentations, future plans, conferences, and what are you working on right now?
Okay, so my main website is richardcassaro.com. And I also have another website that I've had for probably about 16 years. That's deepertruth.com. And I'm also active on social media. I have a Twitter account and a Facebook account and couple of other accounts. But mostly on richardcassaro.com is where you could find my articles and where you could find more of my research. I've been updating my Facebook page quite a bit in the past year or 24 months, And so there's some interesting photos there with some descriptions, but it's hard to get deep in, with the Facebook pages. You're just basically, throwing up some ideas. I have a new book coming out. It's called The Missing Link. It's going to be ready in June, which is about 2 months away. I'm not sure what day in June, but it's going to be ready in June. So that's pretty much what I have on the horizon. I have some other ideas going on. I've been asked to if I would be interested in doing some type of tour company, and that's something I'm thinking about. I've always been interested in bringing people to different countries, and I've been around a lot, and I know what would where people would want to go and what people would be interested in seeing, and so I think it'd be a good idea. I think it'd be fun to put something together where I could actually show people. I like to show pictures. A lot of my work is very photographic and symbolism and that type of thing. But I think it would be really, really fun to,
Yeah.
actually show people, look at this, check this out, look at, and then have a, similarity to this, and then show them this, and then we'll go here. And I like that. That sounds interesting. So I'm entertaining that idea right now. I like writing, I like researching, and I like traveling. So it kind of fits in.
Yeah, even the date you are releasing your book in June is on the summer solstice. So again, very interesting. And yeah, and also interesting that your videos are very phenomenal. You are covering lots of things about the also ancient cathedrals, and like you said, we are building cathedrals now on internet. Like people were building them, with stone in the medieval ages and also in Renaissance, and now we are building the same cathedrals on internet, sharing information, encoding, information we have together. So maybe what could you share? What is, in your opinion, the future for our humanity? Will we learn from that information we are sharing in time? Will we be able to, awake in time, before everything?
It's a good question. It's tough to say because a lot of people, and I've been on Facebook, like I said, a lot in the past year, and I'm a little surprised because from what I've seen, people think that we're kind of coming out of the dark ages, and they're thanking technology for that. And I just don't see that at all. I don't see technology as being something that's going to help us. Let me give you one quick story. Plato talked about how writing, the invention of writing. I mean, you talk to a scholar and they say, well, writing wasn't invented until this time. And they think it's some type of a step up, an advancement. Hey, now we can write. That's good, right? No, not according to Plato. Plato said the invention of writing was bad because then people would not use their memory anymore. And so that right there, is a very important concept. Things that we think are an improvement might not be an improvement. Look at technology. Technology invented the atom bomb. And look what America did with the atom bomb. They dropped it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing innocent women and children. That's a horrific thing. We don't talk about it too much, but that's technology. And, if we can go into space, if it's really true that we are, putting people on the moon and that type of thing, I think we have to really think about when we talk about the golden age, we weren't talking about a humanity like we know today. We're talking about a different kind of humanity. And the closest that we can understand it is when we look at the figure of the Buddha or the figure of Christ, the perfect master, the Superman, the master self, the higher self. That's what these people are showing us, that when you act from the higher self, you tap into powers that you didn't know you had. Quetzalcoatl in Mexico, on the Mayas and that type of stuff. Every culture had their hero. Every culture had their higher self, that godlike person that they held up and showed everybody and said, look, this is your potential. You have this potential. And I think that in the golden age, people reached that potential. And that's why it was the golden age, because people were able to reach that potential. There were a bunch of Buddhas in the golden age. There were a bunch of Christs in the golden age. And when I look at unbelievable monuments like the Great Pyramid of Egypt, all the pyramids, in fact, or most of them in Egypt, Sacsayhuaman in Peru, Baalbek. I mean, you can just name the list. The list goes on and on. The more ancient, the more advanced it is. Okay? So who built that? I don't think that people built those with machines. I don't believe that people built those with some type of a technological fit. I think that people were different back then in that they were more like the Buddha. They were more like the Christ. So they were in touch with powers that we barely understand today because we're living in the dark age. So because we're living in this dark age, it's hard for us to conceive of building these types of structures without some type of a crane or some type of a
Yeah.
lifting object or whatever it is. So that's very, very, very important, because I don't think technology is the way. I think that spirituality is the way. And in fact, I could take it one step further and say it's the third eye, because all the secret societies, all of the great esoteric thinkers, occultists, they all talked about the third eye. And if you look at all the ancient cultures, they all had symbols of the third eye. It was almost like it was the most important symbol in their civilization. Hey everybody, it's Rich Cassaro. I'm author of Written in Stone. This is the third and final video in my Third Eye in Ancient Egypt series. Here we'll see evidence that the ancient Egyptians in Africa, shown here on the right, and the ancient Mississippian culture of America, shown here on the left, shared the same third eye religion, even though these two ancient civilizations evolved separately, thousands of miles apart on opposite sides of the Atlantic Ocean. Now that's a big claim, and big claims require big evidence, and we can see that big evidence right here in this image. Both the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Mississippians were pyramid-building cultures, and we can see that here. But there's an even greater parallel that these two cultures shared, the third eye. Now, we'll get to the third eye in the ancient Mississippian culture in a second. First, on the Egyptian side, here we can see a clear example of the third eye forehead dot. Two eyes flanking a larger third eye dot in the middle. In the first two videos, I explain the symbolism surrounding the third eye forehead dot in Egypt, and I do this by showing similarities to the third eye forehead dot in India, as you can see here. I show how the third eye was visible in Egyptian art and architecture, but more importantly, I show how Egypt's Aten or sun emblem was the third eye symbol in Egypt. The Aten was often depicted between the two eyes on the Egyptian forehead, as we see here, and this is a direct parallel to the forehead dot in India, which also symbolizes the third eye. In Written in Stone, I show how most of the cultures in the New World also shared this same third eye religion, in essence confirming the idea that the third eye was not confined to India. The third eye was a worldwide phenomenon shared by all ancient cultures, and especially the pyramid cultures. This is the crux of my research, that ancient indigenous cultures worldwide all shared the same third eye tradition. So now, if we go back to our original photo, we can easily see how this same third eye motif was present in the ancient Americas, encoded in the artifacts of the ancient Mississippian culture, very, very far from Egypt. There are about a half dozen what are called head pots like this one, and these artifacts feature a third eye forehead dot, similar to the Egyptians. But that's not all. Look closely at the forehead dot. It's a giant circle that appears to be emitting rays of light aimed toward the four cardinal points. It's a powerful looking symbol, isn't it? But the most amazing part is yet to come, because in fact this symbol is well known. It actually has a name. It's called the Zia Sun Symbol, and if you Google Zia Sun Symbol, you'll see it on the flag of the state of New Mexico, as we can see here. According to the New Mexico statutes and court rules, said flag shall be the ancient Zia Sun Symbol. The sun symbol shall be 1/3 of the length of the flag. Said symbol shall have 4 groups of rays set at right angles. Each group shall consist of 4 rays. The 2 inner rays of the group shall be 1/5 longer than the outer rays of the group. The diameter of the circle in the center of the symbol shall be 1/3 of the width of the symbol. Now, if we go back to our original photo, we can see how this Zia Sun symbol rests in the position of the third eye, just like in Egypt. Remember, these are both sun symbols. What an unbelievable coincidence that in both civilizations, the sun symbol was placed on the center of the forehead in place of the third eye. In my opinion, this is the single greatest Old and New World parallel ever found. It shows how two ancient civilizations that evolved on opposite sides of the Atlantic Ocean actually had the same advanced third eye religion. And I use this parallel as evidence for my thesis that the pyramid cultures of antiquity all shared the same third eye tradition. Look at how the face on the head pot appears to be in a kind of spiritual trance, as if concentrating on the third eye. It's the same expression on all the head pots. Not only that, but there's another head pot motif that similarly shows a third eye symbol on the forehead. Look here. This is not the Zia Sun Symbol. The third eye dot on this head pot forms the shape of a star, and if you block out the north-south arms of the star, a giant eye symbol clearly appears, forming a third eye. So this evidence shows us how an amazing archaeological parallel has been discovered, indicating that the same third eye tradition was shared by the ancient Egyptians in Africa and the ancient Mississippian culture in the present-day United States. On its own, this is a profound parallel. When coupled with the fact that both the Egyptians and Mississippians built pyramids and pyramidal mounds, this parallel takes on even greater importance. You can read more on the third eye in ancient Egypt and in the ancient Americas on my richardcassaro.com website, and you can learn much more in my book, Written in Stone. Thanks, everyone. And so that's a pretty important point to make. So, getting back to your question, I see us not, I see if wherever we're headed, and I think we're headed deeper into the Dark Age. I haven't studied this from a point of view of a mathematical point of view, looking at the precession of the equinoxes and trying to figure it out that way. I'm looking at it through history. And, World War I, World War II, those are pretty big things in our recent past. And I don't think that we can look at those two wars and even what's going on now with all the control systems that are in place and say, yeah, we're moving out of the Dark Age. I don't see that at all. I see, people talk about the Renaissance, which means rebirth of the ancient wisdom. Sure, I think the building of the Gothic cathedrals 1,000 years ago, which led to the Renaissance, I think that was kind of a, when you talk about the yin yang, I think there's a little piece of white in the black, and there's a little piece of black in the white, a little dot of white in the black. I think that's what that was. I see that as being a kind of calm in the middle of a storm, a little bit of goodness in the middle of the Dark Age. And I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
Yeah, I think back to the technology, it is kind of taken out of our being and manifesting it right in material right in front of us, what really is in us, and that is certainly distracting. What it could do potentially is remind us, at some point looking at it, hey, I don't need this thing anymore. I can do that again. I understand it again, as a crutch, maybe. That's how I kind of see technology. But yeah, it's indeed kind of shitty technology. It breaks all the time. And our third eye is now in our pocket, instead of, where it still is and needs to be activated.
I love it. Yeah, I see that exactly. It's like, I've gotten into a lot of hot water because I talk not badly about, but I make a distinction between the Western religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam with their monotheistic God, who is outside of you. Okay, he's not inside, he's outside of you. That's what the basis of the teaching says. And then if you look at the Eastern, Hinduism, Buddhism, etc., there the divinity is within you. You are the divine. And there's a big difference. Joseph Campbell talked about it, Alan Watts talked about it, and some of the other recent philosophers talked about that, saying that there's a big difference between the West and the East when it comes to this concept of religion. And in the Western Judaism, Christianity, Islam, the deity is outside of you, and in the East it's inside. And that's a tremendously important distinction to make, because you are the divine. the ancient civilizations all had that same teaching as we retained in the East. You have that divinity within you. You are divine. You have all that power within you. It's just that you're looking for something outside of you to help you. Or in this case, it's the technology, just like you said. We don't need that. And our reliance on it, I think, is just making the situation worse. I think that spirituality is really the way to go, to understand that, as all the ancients talked about, we are a soul, we are a
Yeah.
god. That's what they all talked about. It's not a Richard Cassaro invention. This is what they all said. They all said that. And we are having a dream. This is another very important concept. A lot of people talk about it like a hologram and as if it's evil. No, no, none of this is evil. You're having a dream. You're a god, and you're having a dream of being alive. And that's all it is. That's all it is. I was just working just before our call on this very concept, and I have just 3 good quotes that I want to read. One is from Rumi. Check this out. This is a beautiful quote. "This place is a dream. Only a sleeper considers it real. Then death comes like dawn, and you wake up laughing at what you thought was your grief."
Yeah.
So there's Rumi talking about it. Here's a nursery rhyme. "Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is just a dream." It's a nursery rhyme. It's ancient wisdom encoded in a simple story that's able to be passed down through the ages. Shakespeare: "We are such stuff as dreams are made of, and our little life is rounded with a sleep." That's Shakespeare. And finally, Arthur Schopenhauer: "The universe is a dream, dreamed by a single dreamer, where all the dream characters dream too." This is an important point to make, because I'm trying to show that there's a centuries-old tradition passed down from occultist to occultist, esotericist to esotericist. And we can't ignore that. We have to look at that and say, look, we have to, whatever we discover these days, let's link it to this tradition. A hologram, nobody talked about a hologram. I didn't see anybody talking about a hologram. And I think that confuses people. And that's where I think, I'm a little bit different, is that I'm aware of the tradition that's been passed down for so many centuries. And my work is based on not just my ideas floating freely in the air. It's based on my work linking this to whatever I find to this tradition. And it's important. If I can't link it to the tradition, then maybe it's just my idea and maybe, my opinion. And we all have different opinions. So what good is it? I mean, having an opinion is great. It's fine, but you're not going to it might not lead you to the same wisdom. I'm looking to link this up with with this tradition and these thinkers and these occultists and these philosophers. These were great people, and this tradition is a great tradition. So that's really important to me.
Yeah, very beautiful said. Yeah. It's also interesting, like, in ancient cultures, we were building, the megalith structures. And in this culture, in the 21st century, we are building technology. And that technology may be, the paradox, so far away from spirituality, but it will, maybe remind for the future generations, like leaving some memory or something like that to the future generations. So another investigation you did, which is very, very well known, is the Triptych Design you discovered. So how that came into your path, and how you first, noticed that?
Yeah, that's a beautiful discovery right there. And by the way, that's just one discovery that I've made. It's just the tip of the iceberg. I've got so much more that I've found that I'm ready to bring to the public, that I want to bring to the public. I mean, people have written to me and emailed me for a few years now saying, the triptych is just unbelievable, changed their life. It was right in front of our faces, but nobody could see it.
This triptych 3-in-1 doorway is a real-life Da Vinci Code hidden in the Last Supper. It was Da Vinci's memorial to ancient Egypt, where for thousands of years the triptych graced the facade of Egyptian temples. It conveys a powerful spiritual wisdom that's as important to us today as it was to the Egyptians. Just look at the Egyptian triptych temple of Aswan, the triptych temple of Dendur, the triptych temple of Dendera, the triptych temple of Hathor. Even more mysterious, all the pyramid cultures, not just the Egyptians, built triptych temples, like the ancient Mayans, the ancient Indonesians, the ancient Chinese, the ancient Hindus? Is the triptych the chief symbol of a forgotten universal religion older than recorded time? And is Da Vinci's Last Supper triptych a memorial to this lost tradition? Incredibly, the triptych appears at the entrance of secret society headquarters, like the Freemasons, the Skull and Bones, and the Shriners. These secret societies knew that the triptych is ancient and that it relates a powerful spiritual doctrine that's been outlawed and suppressed in the West for the past 2,000 years.
I've got a lot more like that. I've got a lot more like that. The triptych is going to be, if I end up living a long life, which I hope, the triptych is going to be just one in maybe a few dozen big discoveries because I've got big stuff coming. I'm really taking my time in presenting it. I want the presentation to be clean and easy and nice and scholarly. I think that a lot of what I see is sloppy. I'm seeing a lot of sloppy work. You know, a lot of people are doing great things, don't get me wrong, but I want the movement to be as scholarly as possible, without opinion. I want scholarship because scholarship is important. Anybody has an opinion, but we need to see it backed up by, you know, visual evidence, symbolic evidence, historical evidence. Link it up, back it up, make a case, and that's what I want to do. But anyway, the triptych was something that I found probably definitely when I was in my early 20s. I took a trip to Egypt when I was 24. And probably maybe 2 or 3 years before that, I had already started to notice the concept of three and see the architecture. I was always in New York City, so a lot of buildings in New York City have triptych entrances and triptych architecture. But when I was in Egypt, I really started to see the triptych because one of the most important symbols of the Egyptians is the Aten, the circular disc with the wings on each side and the two serpents flanking it. And the triptych, I noticed, was always the triptych temple was always beneath that. So whenever you would have a triptych temple, the center door was always crowned with the Aten symbol. And so it wasn't just on one temple. I saw it on several temples, and I drew sketches of it and that type of thing. So that's really the first time that I started to say, these temples mean something. There's something about this. And back then, this is 1996, I had still never even heard of Masonry. I didn't even know what Freemasonry was. So when I had gotten back to New York, I saw the same thing in Mexico. I'd gone to Mexico and I saw the same triptych temples. And then I knew I was onto something big because I had known that there's tremendous similarities between the Egyptians and the Mayans and the cultures of Mexico, like the Olmec, the Toltec, et cetera, et cetera. So finding this triptych, I said, wow, this is a major discovery because these are temples. This isn't just some symbol that I found in Egypt and it's the same symbol. No, these are temples. Temples are big stuff. It's probably more important than the pyramids. So that was the time when I said, okay, I found something major, but I still didn't really know what the triptych stood for or what it meant. But I knew I found something big. And so the aha moment came when I was in front of Rockefeller Center in New York City. One of my favorite hobbies was walking around the entire city, walking around Manhattan mostly, and just looking at the architecture and trying to figure out what it all meant. And I started to realize that people had known about the similarities of ancient cultures. Exactly who these people were, I didn't know, but I knew I wasn't the first. But then I was standing in front of Rockefeller Center, and it just was an aha moment. I looked at it and I was looking at it and I saw, wow, that's a triptych. Look at that, boom. And then I started to notice there was a man on the right side, a woman on the left side, and a god in the middle. And, I don't remember the exact point where I figured out that, it was the balance of opposites, but I had already started to realize that the twin outer doors of the triptych stood for duality, which is the pairs of opposites, the sun and the moon, light and dark, hot and cold, etc., etc. who, by the way, the Greek philosophers said were made up the entire universe. And I had known about that. The whole universe is made up of opposites. And that was that's a concept that you find a lot in Greek philosophy and all the philosophies, all across the world. And I started to say, well, that God in the middle, that must be the real higher self. That's the true self. That's the soul. And if you look at Rockefeller Center, the God is holding a compass in his hand. And it wasn't long after that where I realized that there's something called the Freemasons, that their main symbol was the compass, not just the compass, but the compass in the square, but the compass itself in the hand of that God led me to Freemasonry. And when I got there, I thought, wow, this is it. I'm there. I'm going to get initiated, and I'm going to find out everything that I've been looking for my whole life. And it just didn't happen that way. I joined, and I ended up being the one that knew more than anybody. And I don't mean that in a overly confident, self-cocky way or anything like that. No, it's just the truth. I was basically, there were a lot of us who were interested, but whenever we ended up having discussions, it was always kind of me that took the lead and kind of said things, and everybody agreed. So I started doing lectures in the Masonic temples, in the halls, and I started getting, whenever I did a lecture, somebody would say, oh, I want you to come to my lodge now. I want you to come to my lodge now. And it spread like that. And everybody that heard my lectures were saying, wow, this is amazing stuff. This is great. I want to know more. I want to know more. So the whole idea came for a book. Real quick, one other thing, too, was Graham Hancock was the author. Graham Hancock, famous, world-renowned. He was in New York City around this time, and I went to, he was giving a Barnes and Noble's, a lecture at Barnes and Noble's. And I went there to go speak with him, and I wanted to show him some of the similarities, between the old world and the new world that I had found. And when I showed him the triptych, he was really impressed. And he was like, you got to write a book about this. This is really good stuff. And so that was something that I looked at, and I said, okay, if Graham Hancock's impressed, and this is good stuff. I know I'm kind of at the higher level. I have to do something with this. And so he really was a good inspiration for me. And he was a hell of a nice guy. I waited. I was the last person in line. I waited for everybody else to go because I wanted to spend extra time with him. And he spent a lot of time with me, and he was very, very nice. He looked at all the parallels I found, and he told me, he was like, you got something really good here. And so that's what led me to write Written in Stone.
Yeah, and he was very right, and also what you did, this investigation is not only about the structures and megaliths, but it's also the philosophy itself, Also, we know the Walter Russell science, he talks about the balancing two opposites, masculine, feminine into one, and the secret of creation is in the wave. And also in all our mythologies, and also interesting in, for example, if we will look in the Bible, we have Samson's myth, and the Samson meaning man of the sun, and also interesting that at the end when he was, placed between those two pillars, he asked God to give him power to break those two pillars, and just to release everyone and to reach that balance again. So he broke those two pillars and he was standing between them. So again, that sun, man of the sun, and those two pillars, and it's happening everywhere in our mythology. What do you think about that?
I think it's beautiful. I think it's fantastic. It was perfectly said, and just to go back to what I said, was the first thing that I said was I had gone to Egypt and I saw the Aten, the sun symbol, right in the middle of the triptych. That center door of the triptych is crowned with that sun symbol. And that sun symbol is a symbol of your soul, who you really are. It's a circle. And why is it a circle? Because a circle goes round and round and round. It's an eternal symbol. It has no beginning and no end. And so a circle is a symbol of eternity. And you could look at in the heavens. When we look in the heavens, the things that we see are circular. So when we look at the ground, the concept of the high heavens, the things that are high above you, spiritual, aloft, they're circular. Look at the sun, look at the full moon, look at the planets. Everything is a circle up there. Right? So that's showing us that the concept of the circle is a high concept, a concept that's eternal, spiritual, rather than a low concept, something lowly or lower, like the lower self, the animal self. So, yeah, I think it's beautiful. I think it fits perfectly with, with the concept of the triptych.
Yeah, even the name, Mason, and also Samson is the anagram for Mason. So again, it's very interesting. And also Mason is the like son of Ma, or son of Mat, of that matter of mother. So what do you think about that?
That's very good. Yep, that's it. That's the teaching right there. You're adding little pieces on, and that's wonderful. And that's exactly what I try to do now. I'm adding little pieces onto it all. You're talking about Mason too. This is interesting because, you know, another another thing why it's listen to this. Freemasonry, master masons, stone masons. When we talk about pyramids, okay, who were pyramids built by? Pyramids were built in all their cultures. The pyramids were built by the stone masons of that culture. And when we talk about triptych temples, the triptych temples were built by the stone masons of that culture. Okay, so here you have parallels around the world. The ancient pyramids around the world, which were made of stone, and the ancient triptych temples around the world, which are made of stone. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that people don't realize is, and they're stuck with this idea that masonry has only been around for a few hundred years. Not true. The ancient people, if I could use one word to describe the universal religion, it would be Freemasonry. Because think of Sacsayhuaman. Sacsayhuaman was created by master masons, by unbelievably skilled master masons. And the Great Pyramid of Egypt and all the pyramids on the upper west bank of the Nile were built by master masons. These incredibly advanced monuments that we see, the more ancient, the more advanced, are all monuments of stone, okay? They're all made of, in some cases, perfectly cut stone with no need for cement between between the stones, where the joints are so perfectly straight that it looks like some type of machine cut it, but no machine was involved, because that's not what master masons do. Master masons don't need that, you know. Look at the Great Seal of the United States. Okay, you have a pyramid with an eye on top, and the pyramid itself is a perfect, a masterful work of stone masonry, and that's what that pyramid stands for. And the eye above it is the third eye. Think about it like this: it's in a triangle, right? Tri, that means three. Triangle. And a triangle, if you look at the shape of a triangle, it has two lower points that are equal to each other. Those 2 points are symbolic of duality. Those 2 points are the two outer doors of the triptych. And those two doors are reconciled, those two lower points of the triangle are reconciled by the apex of the triangle. The apex is higher than the twin lower points. Just like the center door of the triptych is wider and taller than the two flanking outer doors or windows of the triptych. So that third eye in the triangle completes the pyramid, the unfinished pyramid. So what we have here is a work of unbelievably advanced stone masonry, the pyramid capped with a symbol of the third eye. And in all Freemasonry, the concept of the third eye, the all-seeing eye, is supreme. When you look at the tracing board, you have the two pillars, which you talked about just before, right? Those are the two pillars. They're capped with the sun and the moon because they stand for duality, the opposites. And in the middle, and crowning, just like the apex of the triangle crowns the two lower twin sides of the triangle, the all-seeing eye on the Masonic tracing board caps and crowns those twin pillars, the sun and the moon pillars, the Jachin and Boaz pillars. So looking at the Great Seal of the United States, we see that what they were trying to tell us was not only the concept that ancient pyramid building cultures had the power of the third eye, and that's how they built all these amazing monuments, but that these ancient peoples were in some way masons, stone masons, masterful masons. And we see that in Sacsayhuaman, all over Peru, not just Sacsayhuaman, and all over Egypt, not just in the pyramids. We see it all over the world. And that's the message of the triptych, and that's what I'm trying to bring forth in my work.
What do you think about the mystic capstone on the Cheops pyramid and its symbolism? Was it made on purpose by builders to remind future generations about the dark ages maybe we will be facing?
I think it was made because they were trying to tell us that something's missing from us.
Hmm.
Something is, listen, this is really important. It's a great question, Christina. Something is missing. They left that on purpose. What's missing? What's missing?
Mm.
Something is missing. If you look at the Great Pyramid, for example, is a good one that you talked about. There's another. Well, let's stick with the Great Pyramid for a second. The top is missing, right? And if you look at the Great Seal of the United States, they showed us what's missing. It's the third eye. So we're missing the power of the third eye. We're missing, and the third eye basically. Let's just talk about the third eye real quick. You awaken the third eye and you see your soul within. Where the two eyes see outward at material things, the third eye sees inward at your soul. And when you open the third eye, you recognize you are eternal. You are all powerful. You are a god. And you're dreaming that you're alive on earth. But let's go to Mexico. Look at El Castillo in Chichen Itza, okay? It's a very important pyramid. It's the pyramid where, you remember the two serpents where on the equinox, the two serpents look like they're slithering down the monument? Do you know which one I'm talking about? It's El Castillo in Chichen Itza. It's crowned with a little temple, and the temple has a triptych. It's a very big, powerful triptych. So to me, what that means, and it's very, very clear, and I talk about this in Written in Stone, the the ancient Maya, or the people that built the El Castillo pyramid, were telling us that the missing capstone is the third eye. And we're missing that now because we're in the dark age. And the way to reawaken that or to find it is through the triptych temple, because the triptych temple is the balance of opposites. It's the finding, transcending duality to find the center within you, to find the apex, to awaken your third eye and remember who you are. Remember that you're the higher self. You're not just the lower self that you see in the mirror and that you can detect with your five senses. You're the higher self. And the way to know thyself is through the triptych temple. And that's why there are triptych temples all over the world, and that in the ancient world. And that's why that there are these unfinished pyramids, which are not just in Egypt and Mexico, but all across the pyramid building ancient civilizations.
Mm. Yeah, just imagine if somebody put, a top onto the pyramid again. I think actually, I forgot who it was, but somebody offered to put the golden one on there, and of course got denied. But just imagine the power, uh, with what intent, that this third eye would be populated.
Yeah, yeah, and look at the Eastern religions, Buddhism, for example. Or you can go back. I'm not exactly sure that religion evolved the way that scholars believed it evolved. There's a lot of symbols, a lot of third eye symbols that I see that don't fit into what the scholars tell us. I think the scholars are doing a pretty good job, so I don't want to put them down. But the third eye dot on the forehead, that dot is symbolic of the third eye. And I talk about that also in my articles and in Written in Stone. So that dot is very, very important. That, forehead dot is a symbol of the powers that we can awaken when we do awaken our third eye. Because it's not just a matter of awakening your third eye, seeing your soul within and recognizing that you're an eternal being. It's what comes after that. What can you do now with that power that you have? How far can you take that? Can you quit your job and can you just quit your job and say, you know what, things are going to work out? Maybe. Can you jump off a building and survive? I don't think so, but who knows? You know, it, the concept of the movie The Matrix, I don't know if you know this, but the movie The Matrix, that was originally supposed to be called The Third Eye. And that's really interesting because when you look at the movie, there's a lot of similarities to the actual reality of the third eye. And I don't want to get into them right now, but there are good ones. There are, good, strong similarities where you create your own reality. If you're the one having the dream, well, maybe you can control the dream a little bit, a little bit. I'm not saying that, you can have complete control, but these are concepts that you start to play with and look at and test yourself. And the idea of not being afraid. The only thing you have to fear is fear itself. That's something that changed my life. I had that in big, strong letters, above my desk. That's it right there. The only thing that you have to fear is fear itself, because once you conquer that, then you can do anything. And, I won't say I'm living proof of that, but I mean, my life certainly changed when I realized that I didn't have to work for them. I didn't have to buy into what they were saying I had to. I wasn't afraid if I didn't have, money in my 401k or enough for this or that, or whatever it would be. I just didn't buy into that. And I think that made all the difference in my life.
Yeah, very nicely put. Also, I just very found interesting the post you did on Facebook about the third eye, forehead, sun, and Zia symbol in sun symbol in Mississippian area, and also that Zia phonetically just sounded to me like Mountain Zion, and also in Kabbalah, it's more esoteric reference is made to Zion being the spiritual point from which reality emerges, located in the Holy of Holies of the first, so it's the same like symbol for the sun, for the third eye, and this correlation, even phonetical one, so it stretches for not only one religion but several ones. So what do you think about that?
I loved that. I thought that was great. Yeah, that really got me going. Because I do believe in everything that you said. It's hard for people that aren't into this to really see a connection between words like matter and mother, even though they're the same. Matter and mother. When we think of the earth, we think of Mother Earth, and that's matter, and so matter and mother and water. It's also there. They all go together. But if you're not into the teaching, if you don't have a clue about esoteric, uh, history and that type of thing, it's hard to believe. So I like that you said that, because it was a definite link, and I think it's right. You're right on target. You were right on target with it, and it was perfect. And it made me think too. The Zia Sun Symbol. I mean, what a beautiful symbol that is. Finding the third eye in ancient North America, where we're finding pyramids, we're finding mounds. They call them mounds. I think they were much closer to pyramids at one time. And so there's a connection there. Why did the Egyptians build pyramids? Why did the ancient North American people build pyramids? Why did the Egyptians have a symbol of the third eye on the forehead? And it was a sun symbol, the Aten. And why did the ancient Mississippian culture in North America have a symbol of the third eye dot on the forehead? And why was it the Zia Sun symbol? This is incredible. This is a powerful, powerful similarity. And it just shows me what I was saying before, that when you awaken the third eye, you see the higher self. And that was a symbol that was always symbolized by the sun. The sun is a symbol of the higher self. It's not the higher self, it's a symbol of the higher self. It's the source. The source of you is, the source of everything really that we can claim is the earth, and who we are is the sun. And, just like the sun rises in the east, right? It rises in the east and then it's sets in the west. We too, we have that life cycle as well. Whatever you could see about the sun, you could say about man as well. So there's a strong similarity there, and I think you tagged that when you came up with that connection.
Yeah, even the mountain, we have in the creation myth of the Egyptian Commissions one, they were talking about how, that Aten god, arose from the waters, and, he built that mountain, primordial mount, so again, that completely ties to maybe some similarities to design. So yeah, interesting. And also we were, just maybe could ask some things about the feminine and the great flood we had, because like feminine we have water, like you mentioned, matter, we have marine or mother, it's all the same energy. Like we have fire, which is fire, father, and that warmth, and we have mother, which is water, and that cold one. So interesting thing, we were discussing with Stefan about that, about the flood, and maybe that's why we are so, society, so many centuries are rejecting that feminine. They're trying to suppress that because somewhere deep in our, subconscious, we are still, afraid, not that afraid, but we are still holding that memory of that flood we all experienced, that, culture which experienced that flood, and we lost our memories. So that's why maybe we're so afraid of again, just remembering that trauma we had, that feminine energy, which was that flood. What do you think about that?
That's really interesting. Yep, that's very, very interesting. I would say that maybe the closer here's the thing though, the closer that we get to the golden age in history, the closer that we get to that point, the more we see men and women being equal, which is the way it should be. obviously. Yin and yang are equal. Men and women are equal. And the whole idea that, we live in such a male dominated society is disgusting to me. It's awful. I've always had this deep, deep respect for women and understanding for the sacrifice of womanhood, the sacrifice that comes with being a woman, and tremendous respect for women. And I could never tolerate people being disrespectful to women. It's the worst thing for me. But if you look back to these cultures that are closer to the golden age than we are, there was always a reciprocal and parallel relationship between men and women. Very quickly, one culture that I'm studying very deeply right now is the Etruscan culture. The Etruscans lived and flourished on the west coast of Italy. They say 1,000 years BC, but I believe it was much further back than that, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 BC, which is closer even still to the Golden Age. But if you look at the sarcophagi, if you look at the imagery, if you look at the sculptures, men and women are both on equal footings. And this is something that scholars remark as well, that women in the Etruscan society had every single right that men had. They could do the exact same things that men could do. We see it also in Peru, in the pre Inca cultures. There was a complete equality between men and women, and scholars talk about that, even modern scholars, and you hear that a lot more from the Victorian scholars, the Victorian era scholars. And I read a lot more on the Victorian era scholars than I do modern scholars, though I think there are some modern scholars who really, really know what they're talking about. So the closer we get, the closer we are to the golden age, the more of an equal footing we see men and women are. And I think that it says something about these ancient people, that they knew of the balance of opposites, and they knew that men and women being apart, partaking of that balance, had to be seen as equal. Otherwise, you're living in an unbalanced society, which is what we're living in today. So, yeah, this is
Mm.
this is something that I think is very important.
Another culture is the maybe the Amazons. When we're talking about these giant women that kind of ruled in their matriarchal ways and kind of just kept males for procreation purposes. And if you look at the word Amazon, there's Mason in there as well. You know, uh, it's again the feminine part, the ma, that's showing us where this all comes from. And if you want to go a little bit into linguistics, mama is actually the Latin word for breast. And there's two of them, mama. And when you just have one ma, it is said that the Amazons actually took off one breast in order to have the holster fit better, where the weapons were in and whatnot. So that is all this symbolism. If that's true or mythological, is doesn't really matter at that point, but the interpretation of it, and it's just amazing. And there's another word that encompasses that whole thing. How
Right.
how that all comes together.
Amazing. Amazon. I know. I love that when you start to go down that road, you can start, writing so many words and they start fitting in just like you did. Amazon. Amazing, right? It's just tough to think of on the spot. You have to really sit and reflect. Take off all the electronics, go out in the park, sit with nature, get a pen and pencil, and start to think. That's really where the magic happens. The magic doesn't happen in front of a computer screen. It happens in nature.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is good stuff. The word play. I was into it for a while. I always believe it. Whenever I see it, I believe it. It's not something where I've been with people who, when that comes up, they say, no, there's nothing to that. No, there is. There's something to that. You have to really pay attention to it. Some people make the wrong connections. I'll say that. You have to be careful that you're making the right connections.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's something to it, and I like that. You're into that, and you're spelling it out
Yeah.
nicely, actually.
Yeah, it's just a part that is missing in science in general, and also, of course, in the science of languages, which is, not too old, like 200 something years. uh, the way we're doing it. And but that is a crucial part, because what is language? We're speaking just out our dreams, and we have so many dialects, and we kind of know how that functions. You go to somewhere else, the next city, and they speak a little differently. And so it's only natural to come back, when you look at the whole thing of language, and how they're spread out, to come back to phonics and go that route. I mean, there is this one, language that we all understand, and as we know, that's not written and that's not spoken, but we can come pretty close.
I agree. Yep, it's very important, and it's something that I wish. Wouldn't it be interesting to take a class on that? Wouldn't it, if it was taught more? I mean, you know, no immediate books come to mind when I think of this, where somebody has actually laid out strong, similarities in the words. I think that'd be a good idea for a book. I'm sure, there are some, but like I said, none come to mind immediately.
Yeah, indeed. What could we talk about the G symbol in Masonry, and maybe it's related somehow to the gravity and or gnosis? And also we see that, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Coral Castle in Florida, and we know that at Liskelnin always were mentioning his Sweet 16, which 16 is 6 plus 1 equals 7. 7 is a balanced, number throughout many religions and mythologies. Again, maybe he was relating to that gravity. And what are your thoughts how he were able to build, his castle, and what kind of knowledge he could have been learning from the ancient mythologies?
Yeah, I actually went to. You're talking about Coral Castle,
Yeah.
right, in Florida? Yeah, I actually went there, and it was very fascinating. It was very mystical, and I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. It's funny because, excuse me, I I'd never thought of the G being gravity until you just said it right now, and it fits. It fits, and I'll tell you why. According to the books I've read over the years, um, the G stands for, depending on who you ask, gnosis, God, right? And but there's one more, gnosis, God, and wait a second,
Geometry.
geometry. Boom. So geometry, because it's master masonry, obviously there's a link there, and we could see that, and we can go on and on and on about that. I think that it's very clear that it's geometry. You know, G for God. Now, if it's the monotheistic external God that is, the Bible, where he's killing a lot of innocent people to help the Hebrews get to the promised land and that type of stuff, no, I don't think it's that monotheistic God. I think it's talking about the God within, the God who you are, the God who, as Joseph Campbell said, when you're visiting the home of a Hindu, they bow to you and they put their hands together as if they're praying to you. They're saluting the God that's in you, and you do the same back. It's a very high and beautiful custom. So in that sense, I think it's the lowercase g, God within. Yeah, that works too. Geometry. So we have geometry, God, gnosis. Gnosis is the concept of knowing who you are, knowing that you are that God, knowing that you are that higher self, that higher being. And here's the beautiful part that probably this will be interesting for you guys. In masonry, where we have that G is inside of a circle. And it's not just inside a circle, it's the actual point in the middle of the circle. So that fits in beautifully as well, because the point in the middle of the circle is the soul, the higher self, the eternal part of you. If you think of the point within the circle, that's one of the most important and wide-ranging occult symbols in the world. You find it in every single ancient culture, more than any other symbol.
Mm.
What does it stand for? The point in the middle is the higher self. It's the higher you, right? And the circle itself is turning. And so that's the lower self. In this case, in this situation, that doesn't always stand like that in this concept. And the point in the middle is the G, and that's the God within you. That's the gnosis. That's the part that is, we can find again through geometry, right? Through geometry, we make all kinds of things. There's a lot of guys, Marty Leeds, Joe Dubs, that I've seen on Facebook, who are doing great things with this concept. Geometry and what you can find with it, and really impressive. And I think no matter, no matter how you throw it up, when it falls down, it's geometrical. And so that leads us back to the center of the circle, and that's who we are. So it's almost like, there's a book called Constructing the Universe by John Mitchell, which really had an impact on me. And I started to realize everything is geometric. Everything. Look at the Inca and the pre-Inca, the textiles and the sculptures and the pottery that they left. Everything is geometric. Everything has this geometric slant to it. And so that's what I believe the G stands for. And if you look at a G, how do you make a G? How do you write take a pencil right now and write out the letter G? You're
Exactly.
basically drawing a circle, right, Stefan? And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden you're going bang right into the center,
Yeah.
right?
That
It,
and if you now start looking at it from this symbolic perspective, you also have the spiral, and you also have the circle, and then you're making the square with the angle. So you have the circle and square there right in front of you as well. Um, and it just doesn't stop with this thing. You can also kind of see it as the power symbol, where the male part gets inserted into the female circle, and that's our power sign on all our remotes and whatnot. So and of course it's the seventh letter, and well, we've been over that in many shows, but all the symbolism is just very rich in G, and yeah,
I
great
like
letter.
that. The seventh. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
No, no, I was just done actually. Perfect.
Okay, so yeah, that's it. That's it. I love it. You said it perfectly. I like what you said about the spiral. You tagged on the spiral, which also, look at the letter G with the point in the middle, the circle with the dot in the middle, and the spiral are perfectly related. That's a perfect example of what I was saying before, where the point in the middle is the eternal, and as you spiral away outer, and you're making a bigger and bigger circle away, 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 you're spiraling into material existence. Like, think of the snail shell.
Yeah.
If you look at a snail's shell, that's exactly a spiral, and it's a perfect example of manifestation. It's a perfect example of how the circled dot is a symbol of
Right.
manifestation of the spiritual center.
There's another
Spy.
G word, golden mean, right here.
Right. Yep. That's it. Boom.
Oh.
Yep. Spiraling out to the material world. Right. Right.
Yep, yep, absolutely. In and out the cycle, but the cycle is not the circle. It doesn't do the same route. It makes a spiral into, just like the shell is shaped, into
Mm-hmm.
infinity.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's what we are. We're eternal. We're the eternal part of this equation.
Mm.
The temporary part is the physical. It's who we are, and it's obvious. You're born as an infant child, and then you go through childhood, and then you go through young adulthood, old age, and then you die. And
Yeah.
it's just like what the sun does, right? The sun in the morning, the sun awakens, rises in the
Yeah.
east, and then it's
And it's
midday,
all
and
yeah,
that's
and it's always the same, but it's always different. The only constant that we have is change, and we're constantly trying to hang on to what is presented in front of us. We're trying to put, so to speak, a pattern on the matter, uh, if you can put it that way, and but matter will always change, so it will always destroy the pattern. So that is that female force, the Kali, that destroys, but at the same time births anew, and will put another pattern on it. That's just what we do. That is the fruition of life. But no, that's my thought.
right. The water, mother, the matter, the water washes away, right? The water will wash away anything, and
Right,
that's what
that
happens.
is right. That is squaring the circle. Trying to put the pattern on the matter, and you can't square the circle, as we know. You can just come infinitely close. So it's always changing, and that is the spiral. That is this mandala thing that's always moving. Where that is our Vitruvian man. The squaring the circle, which is always just a changing. and if we understand it and don't hold on to these patterns too much, and just procreate and create out of matter, as we're supposed to, as that is changing, and always try to do the beautiful job we can. I think that is the essence of what the Masonic builders had as their philosophical understanding of what they're doing, because and then it lasts. Look, it does not get destroyed by matter, because it is created with the ultimate pattern.
Yeah, balance point.
Balance point, yes.
Right, which
Thank you.
is that center point in the circle, which is
Yeah.
getting back to the circle and the square. Look at it like this, Stefan. I totally agree with everything you said. Here's another interesting part. When we manifest from the center, right? When we come out of the center to enjoy a physical existence, time is created, right? All of a sudden, so if you draw the circle with a dot in the center, right? That's what we're talking about. That's the basic part. All you have to do now is to make a clock, right? A clock is a circle, right? It has a point in the middle, just like the circle dot, the most important symbol of the occult and the most important symbol to every ancient culture. The only difference between a clock and the circle dot is that the clock has 12 numbers around it, right? One, two, three, that's the time. And that's how, so when you manifest out of the center, time is created. When you start to go around the
Yeah.
periphery, right? Time is created. So
Hmm.
you have that. So check this out. How many numbers are there? 12, right? 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's also 12 months, right? January, February, March, April, right? So that circle is symbolic not only of the time that appears when we manifest out from the center, when the soul takes on physical existence, but also the months that appear, the seasons. Also, north, south, think of a compass, north, south, east, west, those appear as well. So this whole concept of the circle and the circle and the square falls back onto that circle dot. You have to start out with the circle dot. And that's where I think the square comes in when you're trying to find your way back to the
Yeah.
circle dot, trying to find your way back to the middle, recognizing that our existence is a square because we have north, south, east, west, winter, spring, summer, fall, earth, air, water, fire. All of existence can be broken down into four. Before it's broken down into four, it's broken down into two. So you have yin and yang. That's summer and winter. They don't look at spring and fall. Those are just the intermediaries, right? Those aren't really the extremes. The extremes are winter and summer, hot and cold. Those are the first and only pairs of opposites. When you start to break it down more, those pairs of opposites become four. Those two become four. So there you have winter and spring then become winter, spring, summer, and fall. You see, sorry, winter and I'm all over the place. Winter and summer, the hot and the cold, right? Then become winter, summer, and then spring and fall. So you have the square there, and then you have north, south, east, west, earth, air, water, fire, and we could go on and on. And the occultists do go on and on with those, and you can go on and on. So squaring the circle is just really, I think, a concept for not just the incarnation of the soul into matter, but the perfection of the matter, the mat. That's the balance of the Egyptians. The concept of living that perfectly balanced life and creating a perfect ashlar, like the Masons talk about, creating a perfect ashlar from that rough stone. Working on that stone, just like you work on your character, to chip away all the vices and chip away all the anger and chip away all the lower self stuff that you do when you work on yourself. And that's where you get that perfect ashlar, and that's where you find that center within.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. That was very nice when you talked about the clock and the time. Also the clock. We can, look at this circle with, also we can play with spirit, which is spirit something within. So we can play and spirit this time, just going into that and seeing the log, which is the clock is the sea and log. So it's so connecting.
Yeah, isn't that great? I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. And whenever you're having a bad time, draw that out. It's all you. You're the cause of all of it. You're the ground of your own being. You created it all. It's all about you in a sense, but it's all not about your lower self, because then you fall into the trap. You know, it's not about the lower self, it's about the higher self. And when you start to realize that everybody is you, everybody, you're me, I'm him, she's her, we're all the same, we're all equal. And that's when you start to treat others the way you want them to treat you, or the way you would want them to treat you, then I think you got the teaching. And when you really do it from out of your heart, it's got to come from your heart. You can't do it just because you think it's going to make you a better person. It really has to come from within you. You have to have that, you know, that gnosis, that understanding of who you are. And you are everything. You are the entire universe. You are everybody that you see. And all the bad things that you see are you trying to wake yourself up. I mean, this is a concept that Carl Jung talked about a lot. And it really matches up with the occult teaching. This is what it's all about. It's all about everything is you, and everything that happens is you trying to remind yourself to wake up, that you have to wake up,
Yeah.
and also just having and enjoying life. You're here to enjoy life. You're having a dream to enjoy it. And we all know that you can enjoy life. Of course there's stresses, of course there's disagreements and violence and that type of stuff, but you have to learn how to look toward the light, you know not the shadow. Focus on the light and look toward the light, and then I think things will be okay.
Yeah, and sharing information by language, by stories, by acoustics, we can change something. And talking about acoustics, in one of your videos, you made some correlations between the Balinese and the Mayan, cultures and their shapes of buildings. And one part you shared about the sacred corbel arch architecture, which really looks like, grand gallery in Cheops pyramid, like completely the same shape. And also, like, we have friends in Kemet School of Ancient Mysticism. They do the, acoustic sound tryings in the Great Pyramid, and they say that that grand gallery was the generator of some sort of that acoustic. So what do you think about that? And, the correlation is really unbelievable looking at that Balinese and Mayan
It's
corbel
funny.
arch.
I haven't heard that, but if somebody's saying that, then I think that they're onto something, because I believe that, yeah, it is in the Grand Gallery. And the corbelled vault arch, or the corbelled arch, it's called different things by different people, but it is all over the ancient world. I noticed that, and I studied on it, and then I recognized in different books by Victorian era scholars, and also some scholars in more toward our time, talked about that and showed the similarity. It's not just an easy way to build an arch the way some people think. It has a symbolic meaning, and I also suspect very strongly that it has some type of a meaning that has to do with vibration, that has to do with frequency, just like you're saying. The trouble is I've not been able to figure out what it means, and from my research, I've not been able to read any books or come across any videos that really show me that the code has been cracked. I'd love to see it, because that would be a good thing to find, and to hold up as evidence. If you could show the same discovery with vibration that you have in
Yeah,
Egypt and you have in
yeah,
Mexico or Peru, whatever it would be. It's in China. It's everywhere, by the way. Yeah, then I think you have something really good, and I'd love to add that,
yeah,
to this mosaic, to this beautiful similarity of all the religions and all the cultures of the ancient world. I'd love to do that. So, I mean,
yeah.
if somebody's onto that, then I'd really be interested to see what they found.
Yeah, we did several shows with Stephen Miller, with Patricia Awan and Joseph Awan about the Commission history, and they are just very deeply investigating the ancient lost technology. They have their own school, they are doing tours, and they are leading some acoustic tours in all around the Egypt in the temples, and they are showing how some kind of the technology, and maybe not technology as we imagine today, was used in order to shape the stone. And also, the things we are now investigating, like, reliefs, like symbols carved on those, magnificent stones, are way, way, younger than the stones themselves. And they are also just doing that acoustic investigation too. And another interesting thing I just also wrote here in plot to talk about to you, again, the investigation from Kemet School of Ancient Mysticism. They did some correlation with Inca and Egypt cultures, and they were looking at the Saqqara Egypt 5th dynasty tomb of priest Kagame, and Joseph Iwan just pointed to inscription, and Stephen Miller read that as the direction from Tawi, which means all lands, another term for Kemet, to Peru, which means many houses, or also Peru itself, is across 4 waters, and those waters would be the Nile, the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Amazon. And ancient commissions, according to Commission School and their investigation, they did in the scripture, were in Peru 4,400 years ago. So they just literally found the relief, saying this, that some connection was made between those two very separate lands, and they were communicating together. So I think definitely you would find very interesting to investigate more
Yeah,
this.
sure. The Peru, Peru is one of the most fascinating places in the world, as is Egypt. And yeah, I mean, the pre-Inca cultures and the Inca culture, that so many parallels to Egypt. I mean, in mummification and the way they cross their arms. I mean, you can just, the list goes on and on and on. And one of the articles that I'm most proud of is one that I wrote comparing the Egyptian and the ancient pre-Inca and Inca cultures of Peru, because there are a lot of similarities, including the triptych. And so yeah, that's a very interesting that's very interesting stuff. And yeah, I'd have to take a look. I'd have to look into that.
Okay, beautiful. Another interesting thing we'd love to talk also is animal symbology and anthropomorphical depictions, in ancient mythologies. And an interesting thing, we talked with Sevan Bomar, and he did some investigation about the snake and lion, and also, for example, cats. We have cats, and in Kemet school and all around the Egypt culture, they worship the cat, so called. They thought something is deep in the cat, and also they build sphinxes. And what's interesting, that in the cat we have the eye of the snake. Some kind of the correlation of snake and lion was connected to make the cat, because lions don't have those kind of eyes cats have. They have round eyes. So what are your point of view towards that, the symbol of the changed eye, and also the cat animal as also anthropomorphical depiction?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the cat is a very, very, very mystical animal. I mean, when the first thing that comes to mind when I think of a cat is Halloween and witches. And I know that what that is it's a symbol of something that came earlier, hundreds of years earlier. Witches, not necessarily in in the sense that we think of a witch as Halloween. We think of magic. We think of the pentagram. Women who are interested in the mystical arts. Women who are interested in and who are good at magic and are good at the earth. We call them the earth religions and that type of stuff. So the cat is the familiar of the witch. So why? Why is that? Because the cat is a mystical creature, and many of the ancient cultures saw that. As you said, the concept of the cat was very powerful in Egypt. The Egyptologists say they worshipped the cat. I don't believe any, but they worshipped anything. They saw the cat as a symbol of something, and they saw the cat as a symbol of something magical, something feminine, something mysterious, and that's the mystery of life, and that's the mystery of when we have to um, look inward. We sometimes encounter dark things, and it's important that we shine a light on those things. It's important to shine a light on the shadow, and so the cat, I think, talks to all that type of um, peering in the darkness of our own selves to in our way toward the center, finding the center. And I'm trying to think of some more examples to throw out there, but unfortunately my mind doesn't work like that. If I'm
Well,
drawing a blank on it, I'm
yeah,
drawing a blank. But if you want to throw something out there, I'd love.
sure. If we study cats, they sleep a lot, and that dark space that you're talking about, is our dream world. That world that we can't see when we have our eyes open. But when we close it and it's dark, then we go into the dream world, and that is what cats spend an incredible amount in. And you can communicate with them. If you have cats, everybody knows that you can, you communicate them on a different level than with a dog, for example. And another thing is that it is said that cats can actually do that mental power and leave their body while they are hunting, moving, and have the eyes open, and
Yeah.
they can like look around the corner and sense that in a way where it's out of body experience mixed with being switching dimensions almost, if you want.
Yeah.
And
Indeed.
that is just so incredible with these cats. They know when people die, they know when people get born, and they're always around and giving you this look, and they teach us also, just be yourself. Like, there's no authority. I'm not gonna listen to you. I'm not. I'm not
Yeah.
your pet.
Right. They have that self-assured attitude. They're very, very confident most of the time, most of them. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. I do. I think that's good. I think I like that. I do. They have 9 lives, the concept of life after death, right? You're talking about we're talking about that exactly, mysticism, and it plays in with that. I'm trying to think of meow. What does what does meow mean? I'm just throwing it out there. Pussycat, another association with the feminine. Um, I like it. It's good stuff.
Yeah, of
Yeah, and
course,
also,
the cat
yeah.
eye, sees in the dark and is a reflective like a mirror. Uh,
Yeah, sees in the dark, cat's eyes.
mm,
The way they glow,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when they glow in the dark.
yeah, and of course the tail is moving like a serpent. It's mimicking. It's the wrong thing to look at, and it gives away wrong information. Like
Hmm.
opposite of the dog, for example. If he waves the tail, he's happy, but if a cat does it, it's to distract you because she wants to pounce.
Yeah.
Right, and it's funny the way you're talking about the cats and the dogs, and it's just playing into the concept of the balance of opposites that we were talking about before. You know,
Right?
I've always seen the dog as the man and the cat as the
Yeah,
female.
that's how it's suggested to us, anyways.
Yeah, yeah. So that's good. I mean, that's good stuff.
Yeah. And also in all the stories how they teach, children that, cat and dog are the enemies so called in the house. So like again that masculine, feminine, fighting each other constantly. Even though in nature it's not like that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's always fun to look at dogs and cats and see men and women in there.
yeah. And then there's the mouse, right? And that's a that's the one
Balance.
between them. That's the one between the two. If you want the cat
The
to be
gray one.
the
Yeah.
the she god, and the dog is the he god, and dog backwards spelled is god.
Mm-hmm.
The
Anubis.
mouse, and mouse and man stories. Were always kind of compared to the mouse as man. Just look at Mickey
That's good
Mouse
stuff.
and
I, I like the dog spelled backwards as God. That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, and also it relates to the Anubis, the because he had of the dog in Egyptian mythology. So again, Anubis, and he was related to he was having dark skin, and also related to the underworld. And
Hmm.
also, if talking about the cats, we have the Sekhmet, goddess, which was the with cat head. So she was related to the fertility, and again the mother energy. So again, those two polarities, it's unbelievable.
Right. They match up together. That's beautiful. Yep. I like it. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Not sure if I can add anything, without. I like to present material with photographs. I like to present with, quotes. I like to present. It's hard for me to just throw things out there because, it, like I said, my mind doesn't really work like that. I'm so used to just finding evidence for things. I would love to do an article on everything that we're talking about, but I want to do it with, with photos of. Photos that
yeah,
somehow match them up together, and that's how I discover things, by looking at something and then by reading something and then saying that's interesting, let me match that up with this and
Yeah.
see if it works. It's hard for me to just come up with things off the top of my head. It's good, it's actually easier with you guys talking about it because I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, that's good, I wish I could write it down. I'll write it down. I'll re-record. I'll re-listen to the video and write these down. But yeah, that's good stuff.
Well, thanks. I mean, that's so great that we can combine these things today. Your style of researching and our forum of bringing these people together and kind of syncing it all up. We've learned so much from guys like you who go into the matter, deep, 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 and we're just here to kind of connect the dots for everybody and present it. But it's all the work that has to be done first. That this experience that one has to make themselves to be able to give back in an understanding way. But hey, thank you so much for taking the time here. I think we covered a lot of ground. If there's anything else, I think I'm sure we can do this again. But we'll certainly add some pictures to that presentation because it does make it so much more, cool.
Right.
So if you want to add some, we will certainly use some of your stuff, and it'll be definitely picturesque undertaking here.
Yeah, well, no, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the invitation. It was great talking to you guys, and thanks for being interested in the symbolism and in the architecture and in hearing me out. And I appreciate it, and it was great talking to you guys. I had fun, and thanks again for for inviting me and for talking with me.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Really amazing.
Yeah.
Great, thanks so much, Christina. Thank you.
Enjoy your nice weather in Spain.
All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to rub it in at the beginning of the hour. So yeah, thank you very much. I will. We are. But I'm sure good weather's coming for you guys too. So.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Okay. Have a good
All right, guys. Thanks very much. Have a great evening.
evening. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
We all want to see, we all want to be real, and we're searching when we're finding. We all want to feel the taste of belief, and we search for directions when we meet with our fears. We all want to steer, we want to appear, even in the highest battle, face the enemy. Do you feel the craze of fear? There is no need to disappear.